What's going on, everybody? Off the Mic Sports Network here, another edition of Off the Top Rope. So, Full Gear coming up Saturday night from Newark, from New Jersey, from the tri-state area, I guess as they call it. I'm a West Coast guy, so I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. You guys can correct me in the comments. Big match coming up. So, this card's not very good. This card is not very good. Bunch of rematches, John Moxley's facing Kyle O'Reilly, which is weird. To me, the biggest match, and probably the one that's going to create the most headway and the most headlines of all of them is, the Women's World Championship match between Kris Statlander and Mercedes Mone. And some people will say, well, Mike, you've been very adamant of, you don't think that the women are going to main event this show. And yes, I have put that on social media. I don't think that Tony Khan is going to make this the main event. And here's why. And then I want to get to my point of my overall thoughts on this match. Listen, had there been precedent to do this, to put a women's match in the main event of a pay-per-view, they would have done it already. Because they've already had two opportunities this year to do it. They had Revolution, which absolutely should have been the decision. Hollywood ending between Mariah May and Toni Storm. We know why that match didn't go on last, because Mariah May was leaving and she was going out the door, and now she's Blake Monroe in WWE and doing great things over there. Don't let the sickos tell you that she's not being successful where she is right now. And then All In Texas, the only reason why they didn't do that there is because they had a bigger story and they had a Texas death match. But Toni Storm and Mercedes Mone could have very easily, with a much better build and, maybe a better circumstance, could have main evented that show. I'm sorry, Kris Statlander and Mercedes Mone, even if it probably is the most newsworthy match on this show, is not main eventing. Hangman Adam Page and Samoa Joe in a steel cage is probably main eventing this pay-per-view, more likely than not. So here's the thing. Everybody thinks I hate Mercedes. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Sasha Banks, that persona carried her to a lot of her success in her career. But ever since she got to AEW, her ego has taken over this place. And the women's division is completely shell-shocked from everything that she has done there. And to the point where they had to throw the 4 remaining tag teams in the women's tag team tournament into a winner gets to choose a stipulation in their semifinal match of the tournament. That's all the women's matches that we have on this show, because the TBS champion is facing the world champion again. This is the second pay-per-view this year that this has happened. Now, gun to my head, if you asked me right away who I thought was winning this match, let me just say this. I'd like to think that AEW is smart enough to not give Mercedes another title. Then again, Tony Khan doesn't really know what the fuck he's doing. I think Kris Statlander is going to win this match. And Kris Statlander should absolutely win this match, no questions asked, because she needs it. She needs to be validated as the women's world champion, and Mercedes doesn't gain anything by picking up another championship. And I think the more interesting story to tell is Mercedes not being able to win the big one. Now, as I say that, here's the problem. AEW is in a no-win situation no matter what the outcome is. Yes, I think Kris Statlander should win. I think that's the right outcome. That doesn't mean I think it's a good one. That doesn't mean I think these are two really bad choices that AEW has to make. Going back to, All In Texas, that wasn't a really easy decision to make. And they went with Toni Storm, and 2 months later, Toni Storm doesn't have the title. The way this looked like when Toni Storm lost was that they were basically using Kris Statlander as a placeholder because they didn't want to have Mercedes beat Toni at this point in time. Who knows if that's the case? Because if Mercedes wins, that's very clearly what happened here. Now, let me just lay out why I think that this is a no-win situation. This is a no-win situation, as I said, for AEW. If Kris Statlander wins, let's go with that first, the outcome that I think will happen. The 13 championships, well, really, which is 12, 11, or because some of those aren't even championships. The other belts that she is holding mean nothing. So all that you guys tell me about her growing women's wrestling and being the global revolution, her going around and winning every other pop-up championship under the sun, and her not being able to win the AEW Women's World Championship on 2 separate occasions this year, that doesn't make the other championships look good or the other promotions look good, in my opinion. Because it makes everybody else look like a bunch of scrubs. It makes the TBS title look like a secondary title, if I ever saw one, which is kind of what it's supposed to be, but that's not the point. If Mercedes Mone wins this match, let's go there, because this is the obvious one. The women's division in AEW is dead. It's already on life support. But if Mercedes Mone wins this match, that means Kris Statlander's title win at All Out was a sham. And all it meant was, hey, we're going to get this off of Toni Storm. Mercedes has 14 titles. There's no women in the division that even remotely measures up to her in stature. And the only positive that you can even take away from that is you're going to have to build somebody up to the point of, hey, who's going to take this terror down? So the best of 2 really bad options here is to have Stat go over here. Because the other part of this is Stat has already lost to Mercedes twice. So if you have Kris Statlander lose a third time, second year in a row at Full Gear, in the same exact venue, by the way, if you have Kris Statlander lose again to Mercedes Mone, that buries her, that ends her aura, and that ends any opportunity of her being taken seriously. So I think on that alone, I think Kris Statlander should win this match. That being said, I'm not ruling out Tony Khan doing something stupid and Mercedes using her creative control to ultimately win this match and be a 14. Because like I said, there's really no good option here, because either you're devaluing all of the championships and the 13 belts Monet that she is, or you're killing the women's division with her winning her 14th title. That's where we are. And that's not a good place to be in at all. I'm fascinated to see what this outcome is going to be. To me, this is really the only thing on this show that even is worth a damn. I don't even care about Hangman and Samoa Joe, and those are 2 of my favorite performers in this company. I don't give a shit about this match. Even if it's in a steel cage, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything because, and I'll have to talk about this in a separate video, but that match doesn't mean anything. But that being said, I don't think Tony Khan has a set to put Stat versus Mercedes in the main event. He may do it, but it would also be kind of a joke of a move, because he should have did it at Revolution. I mean, there's an argument that he could have done it at All In Texas. But if he wasn't going to do it the first or second time, why the hell would he do it right the third time? So anyway, like I said, no win situation here for AEW. No matter what they do, it's not a good look either way. Because like I said, either you're devaluing Mercedes Mone and all of her championships that she has won, whatever, 13. I don't even give a shit how much of the count. Like, she unified another championship. She's just beaten every woman imaginable outside of Toni Storm. So you're devaluing all those championships. So everybody who wanted to argue, hey, she's elevating all of these women from all these other different promotions because she has their championships. I was like, no. Because now if she loses the AEW Women's World Championship while carrying around all those titles, that means those are secondary prizes, because she can't win the one that actually matters, which is what AEW is trying to tell you. And then if she just beats Kris Statlander, the AEW women's division is fucking screwed, because basically nobody's on her level. Like, nobody really cares. She's won all these titles. She's basically ran through the entire women's division, and to the point where nobody gives a shit about this anymore. And, hey, maybe we'll have a women's national championship, because they're making a national championship at this show on Saturday. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.